Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. The PFL is returning to Atlantic City. That's right. The number 2 MMA organization in the world is back starting April 23rd to start their regular season. And joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, Peter Murray, the CEO of PFL, joins us to talk about why Atlantic City, the protocols, the bubble. There's a lot that goes into this as they are going to be over at Ocean Resort. Pete, how you doing today?
I'm okay, Josh. Thanks for having me. And we're excited to launch the season in Atlantic City at Ocean Casino Resort. We have great history in Atlantic City, so we're excited to be back.
Right. You guys were there back in 2019. So it's obviously been a year since people have seen the PFL in action. So I think one of the biggest questions a lot of people out there want to know is, why did you choose Atlantic City? Because obviously you could have gone a lot of places, but why Atlantic City?
Yeah, I'd say 3 reasons. Number one, we've had a great experience in the past in Atlantic City, staging PFL events. 2, Ocean Casino Resort is a world-class property, and they really rolled out the red carpet for the PFL to create our bubble, no different than the NBA's bubble, to keep our athletes safe and ensure we get the season in. And then I would say 3, Atlantic City has such great history in the fight game. You know, obviously boxing, and but there's been other MMA events there. So we like the legacy and a great fan base, of course.
You mentioned about how Ocean Resort has really set things up for you guys to have this bubble. Give the audience an idea about what went into setting up that bubble with Ocean, because I think a lot of people want to know, like, is this something where the people get there and they can't leave, like you mentioned with the NBA? Is this an issue where maybe like with the NFL where it was, hey, you only can leave the building and come back, but you can't go anywhere else? How restrictive is this bubble, and how did Ocean help you set this up?
Yeah, so great question, Josh. So first and foremost, our events for the regular season, which are April through June, will be made for TV only, no fans. So it really is a studio production, which we'll have in their main venue, Ovation Hall. So that'll be our made for TV venue. It will look great live on ESPN, and obviously distributed throughout the world to 160 countries. So it's very operational. It's a production. And the Ocean Casino Resort ownership and management, they are up and running. They are obviously hosting guests throughout the property and the casino, et cetera. But for the PFL, we carved out exclusive rooms and floors and segregated areas so that our fighters can train and prepare and actually keep them insulated from other guests as it relates to all the COVID protocols. We're doing daily testing, segregating the fighters, supporting their training, as I mentioned, in preparation. They have access to a world-class fitness center exclusively at the resort. We've set up a cage, so they have access to create appointment-driven cage time for training, as well as personal mat spaces. So, fighters, we do have COVID protocols in terms of distancing and different zones where our operational staff, we are limiting the amount of people that have access to the fighters themselves.
So this really does sound very similar to what the NBA did. This really does sound like you literally have a carved out section of the resort that is only for you guys. So then how does it work with the other amenities? How are players, the fighters, they're athletes, they're not players, but they're athletes, they're fighters. How are they getting food? How are they getting amenities? How is that all working? Because I assume that if you have a section to you guys self, there's probably other amenities that are separate to you guys as well, correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, we have a dedicated fighter services team on property who are employees of the PFL and affiliated with the PFL, and their jobs are every day to help the athletes schedule all of their training times, access to different points in the property, and in addition to meal concierge program that's been put in place, as well as other services.
Peter Murray, CEO at PFL, joining me here on the Boardwalk Hunter Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. The PFL regular season starts April 23rd, and as he mentioned, it goes through the summer. Of course, at the end of every year, PFL doesn't just award a champion for the playoffs, but also they walk away with a nice $1 million check, which is also a nice perk that a lot of other sporting organizations, not just MMA, sporting organizations can't lay a claim to at all. You mentioned the COVID testing. What kind of COVID testing we talk about? People know about the nasal. People know about the saliva. How does the COVID testing work for the fighters?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into those specific protocols and details, but state-of-the-art testing that other sports leagues are using. We had the benefit to learn of what's working and what's not in terms of bubble protocols, testing, and procedures. So all that's in place. Candidly, fighters before they get on a plane, half of our fighters come from outside the U.S. We have 21 countries represented, if you will, on our roster. And so before anyone even steps on a plane, they do receive a COVID test from the PFL and our testing partner prior to getting on a plane. So they obviously they must test negative. We test them when they get on the ground, and then they go into quarantine for a window of time, and then we open things up to get their training process underway.
Now, you mentioned how you guys took a lot of things from other sports leagues and organizations. You kind of guys said, hey, this is what everyone else did. We're going to take the best of what everyone did. That's what it sounds like you're saying to me. So for you, were there anything that was brought to your attention by maybe fighters or their coaches or maybe your own staff that you said, hey, the other organizations could have done this, they didn't, we're going to do this as well? Were there any of those situations?
Absolutely. Certainly within combat and MMA, we're very unique because we're the only organization in the world that presents MMA with a regular season playoff and a championship format, a season structure, again, similar to the NBA. And some of the other organizations, they're promotions, they're one-off events. And you have many athletes still contracting, unfortunately, the virus, and it disrupts the event and their cards. However, it would have a more negative impact on the PFL if that should happen, because all of our athletes, they got to start with us, and then they got to earn their way through the regular season to the postseason. So, we really can't just be swapping in and out athletes and changing cards event to an event. Every event in the PFL leads to the next. Every fight counts. So this is why we really had to create a traditional bubble for all the athletes competing, unlike testing and protocols for one-off events. And one of the decisions we did make was 17 days. Typically, our events, fighters don't report to the league, headquarters, if you will, and hotel until 3 days before the event. And we're having them report 17 days before the event. So should a fighter or even a member of their team contract the virus, they can at least go into quarantine and still have an opportunity, should they not be experiencing any symptoms. Once they're cleared, they'll still have an opportunity to compete. So that went into some of our thinking.
Now, of course, you guys are in Atlantic City over at Ocean Resort. It's very exciting to have you guys back in town, but there will be no fans. You said earlier, this is a TV-only production. So I'm assuming that part of the reason why you developed this bubble was because even though there are fans slowly coming back to events, it sounds like to me what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're saying in order for us to make sure the quality of the bubble, the structure of the bubble stays intact, that we don't want to risk anything. Am I reading that properly?
You are. Yeah, we're very focused on not bending that bubble, being very conservative. We'll obviously evaluate after the regular season as we think about postseason, changing some of our policies and protocols for the athletes and the operational staff. And perhaps, we're hopeful that fans will have access to attend the events. But we'll cross that bridge a little later in the season, and we'll go from there.
Is there any consideration for the postseason being in Atlantic City as well?
Not at this time. We're committed for the regular season, and likely we will be taking our playoffs to another location for a mini residency. But we'll be back to Atlantic City certainly next year, and more events to come.
Peter Murray, the CEO of PFL, joining me here on Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, PFL regular season, you can watch all the fights, ESPN2, ESPN Plus. All the coverage starts April 23rd. And speaking of April 23rd, you guys are starting off with a bang, P. I mean, you guys had a good roster. You have a really good roster for this year. I mean, you got guys like former lightweight champion Anthony Pettis. You have Kayla Harrison returning. I mean, who are some of the fighters that you're excited about? Because I know for me as an MMA guy, I'm looking at your roster and I'm saying, let me tell you something. This is competitive with anybody on planet Earth right now. And I mean planet. This is not just a U.S. thing. This is an international thing you guys got going on.
No, I appreciate that, Josh. Yeah, we've worked really hard, candidly, in 2020 to improve the roster, elevate the level of talent. We have some of the best athletes, to your point, in the world competing in the PFL. You mentioned Anthony Pettis coming over. He's still in his prime. He has something to prove. He wants to take down another belt, and he loves the idea of fighting potentially, if he makes it to the championship, 4 times in 7 months. There's no other bigger challenge in MMA to go through that type of format and the cadence of that. I mean, top fighters in the world typically don't fight more than 3 times, some 2, and no more than 3 times in a given year, but 4 times in 7 months. It's a big challenge, and we have top competition. And to your earlier point, there's a prize. At the end of the day, every athlete in the PFL knows they have a clear shot and what it takes to become champion. And it's called they earn it. And so we provide that opportunity. So really, that's what's compelling star talent coming over to the PFL. We're on a global stage. We have top talent, and we give a transparent opportunity to become champion. Those 3 things. So you got Anthony coming over. You mentioned, I think you may have mentioned Rory McDonald, former Bellator welterweight champion, also in his prime, has something to prove, and is looking forward to this challenge and opportunity. Fabrizio Verdum, arguably the greatest of all time heavyweight in the sport, 2-time champion in the UFC, and he's still in my view, he's the Tom Brady of MMA. He is still active. He's still in the game, and he's competing with the best of them at any age and taking them on. So he also has something to prove. So we're excited about Fabrizio. And we'll be announcing Clarissa Shields. Her debut date is actually June 10th. It'll be in Atlantic City. Now, that is an epic moment in sport, not just MMA. When you think about what Clarissa Shields has accomplished as a 2-time Olympic gold medalist in boxing, the only man or woman to achieve that in USA boxing history, greatest woman of all time professional boxer with 4 belts, and now she's going to take on the sport of MMA with the PFL. Her debut will be June 10th in Atlantic City, and ESPN fans can expect a lot of original programming and promotional support behind that fight. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, speaking of that program on ESPN Plus, you guys got the series about Randy Couture and his career over on ESPN Plus. That's just a sample for those out there to give them an idea of what kind of programming you guys have with ESPN. I'm glad you mentioned about Clarissa Shields because, this is someone who I think she embodies what you guys talk about. She wants to compete. She wants to be the best. And to me, when you have fighters who say, I want the challenge, I embrace the challenge, to me, that's what elevates you guys. Because let's be realistic. There are some fighters, they're not interested in the dangerous. They're not interested in the unknown. They're interested in just, getting their check, doing their fight, and moving on. And Clarissa is a perfect example of the best at what she does, saying, I don't want to just be the best at boxing. I want to be the best at boxing and MMA. And to me, as a fight fan, that's exciting.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Josh. I had the opportunity to sign USA Boxing when I was at Under Armour. Clarissa was on the team. And so I've really been following her journey for many years. And, really jumped at the opportunity to sign her. And she trusted us. Our president of fighter operations, Ray Sefo. Ray is a former six-time world champion, K1 kickboxer. He's an athlete. He's also a trainer. He develops elite talent in MMA. And so she really trusted us to help shepherd her into the sport. And also we were open to her competing with another promotion in boxing, if you will, and her competing in boxing while she enters MMA. And we're all about supporting the athlete. And her absolute goal is to be a two-sport champion. And so we'll be part of that journey. And I know fans it's going to be a highly anticipated event, June 10th. And let's not forget, this is an Olympic year. And MMA is an outlet for Olympians around the world, from different disciplines, whether it's wrestling, now boxing, obviously judo. Kayla's a two-time Olympic gold medalist. And now she's number 3 in the world in MMA, number 1 in women's 155 weight class. She's 8-0, and she is yet to leave her mark on this sport. She's on a mission. So we're really excited to see Kayla get back into action. There's elevated talent, certainly on the women's roster beyond Clarissa. And Clarissa's not in the season yet. We're gonna be staging 2 fights for her, up to 2 fights this year. And then next year, in 2022, fans will have the opportunity to see Clarissa enter into that season format, fighting 4 times, potentially over 7 months.
Against PFL, they start season on April 23rd. It goes through June. He mentioned June 10th for Clarissa Shields. And, of course, you can watch all the action on ESPN2, ESPN+. They're in Atlantic City. They're right in our backyard. They got the bubble. They're getting it all set up. Peter, we appreciate you jumping on as all guests on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.
You got it. I really appreciate it. And although we can't let fans in down in Atlantic City in the South Jersey area, but we know fans are going to be having their viewing parties and getting their fight on Friday night, April 23rd on ESPN for sure.